In a small village, an ambulance was rushing in a hurry. Suddenly, its path was blocked by a dog that refused to move. A veterinarian was called to try to remove the dog. When she discovered the reason it was there, she was stunned. Before hearing this touching story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more animal tales. The sun had barely risen when the first golden rays began to illuminate the narrow, winding streets of Flower Valley, a small village nestled among verdant hills. The aroma of fresh bread and freshly brewed coffee hung in the air, mingling with the scent of the flowers that gave the town its name. It was a morning like any other, or so it seemed. In the central square, old Mr. Thompson opened the doors of his bakery, greeting the few early risers who passed by with a warm smile. Among them was Dr. Sarah, a young veterinarian who had moved to the village less than a year ago. With her brown hair tied in a messy ponytail and alert green eyes, she walked hurriedly towards the veterinary clinic, balancing a cup of coffee in one hand and a folder full of papers in the other. "Good morning, Dr. Sarah," called Mr. Thompson, waving animatedly. "Ready for another day taking care of our furry friends?" Sarah smiled, slowing her pace for a moment. "Always, Mr. Thompson. Each day is a new adventure." Little did she know how true her words would prove to be that morning. As she crossed the square, Sarah noticed an unusual movement near the gazebo. A medium-sized dog with golden fur and intelligent eyes was intently watching something in the distance. The animal seemed restless, alternating between low barks and anxious whimpers. Intrigued, Sarah approached cautiously. "Hey, buddy, what's wrong? Is everything okay?" The dog turned to her, its expressive brown eyes seeming to plead for help. Before Sarah could do anything, the animal darted towards the main street, barking frantically. Surprised by the sudden reaction, Sarah hesitated for a moment before following the dog. Something about its behavior made her uneasy, as if it was trying to communicate something urgent. As she approached the main street, the sound of a siren cut through the tranquil morning air. An ambulance appeared around the bend, lights flashing as it sped towards the town hospital. Sarah felt her heart race, a sense of apprehension growing in her chest. The dog, however, showed no fear. On the contrary, it ran straight into the middle of the street, positioning itself right in front of the rapidly approaching ambulance. "No!" shouted Sarah, her heart almost stopping as she watched the scene unfold. The ambulance driver, noticing the unexpected obstacle, slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched on the asphalt, leaving black marks as the vehicle skidded, stopping inches from the determined dog. Sarah ran towards the scene, her mind a mixture of relief and confusion. The dog remained firm, staring at the ambulance as if challenging it to continue. "What's going on here?" asked one of the paramedics, jumping out of the ambulance with an expression of frustration and concern. "We have an emergency." I don't know," stammered Sarah, cautiously approaching the dog. "He just ran in front of the ambulance." The animal, however, didn't move. Its eyes alternated between the ambulance and the direction it had come from, barking occasionally, as if trying to communicate something. "Look, we don't have time for this," said the other paramedic, joining his colleague. "We need to get through. There's a life at risk." Sarah nodded, understanding the urgency of the situation. She crouched down, extending her hand to the dog. "Come here, buddy. Let's get out of the road, okay?" To her surprise, the animal backed away, firmly maintaining its position in the ambulance's path. Its barks became more intense, almost desperate. The situation quickly attracted the attention of the townspeople. Windows opened, curious faces appeared in shop doorways. Mr. Thompson, still wearing his baker's apron, joined the group forming around the unusual scene. "What the hell does that dog want?" someone in the crowd muttered. Sarah, however, was beginning to suspect there was more to this situation. The animal's behavior was too deliberate, too insistent to be just a canine whim. "Wait," she said to the paramedics, who were already preparing to forcibly remove the dog. "I think he's trying to tell us something." The dog, as if understanding Sarah's words, barked once more and took a few steps in the direction the ambulance had come from. Then it stopped and looked back, as if expecting someone to follow. "You said there's an emergency, right?" Sarah asked the paramedics. "Where were you coming from?" The younger paramedic frowned, confused by the question. "We received a call about an injured man on the road leading to the waterfall." "Why?" Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. The road to the waterfall was known to be dangerous, with sharp turns and poor visibility. if there was really someone injured there. "I think the dog is trying to lead us back there," she said, her voice trembling slightly with the realization. "He might have seen something you didn't see." The paramedics exchanged skeptical looks, but the dog barked again, this time with more urgency, taking a few more steps towards the road and looking back. "Look, we don't have time for this," said the older paramedic, clearly impatient. "We have to get to the hospital." Sarah, however, felt she couldn't ignore the animal's behavior. Something in her instincts told her there was more to this story than met the eye. "Please," she pleaded, "give it a chance. What if there's someone else injured there? What if the dog is trying to alert us to something you didn't see?" The crowd around murmured, divided between the urgency of letting the ambulance pass and curiosity about what the dog might be trying to show. It was Mr. Thompson who finally spoke, his calm voice cutting through the hubbub. "I think we should listen to Dr. Sarah. That dog doesn't seem to be acting by chance." The paramedics hesitated, clearly torn between their duty to take the patient to the hospital and the possibility of someone else needing help. "All right," the older one finally said, sighing heavily. "We'll take a quick look. But if we don't find anything in 5 minutes, we're heading straight back to the hospital." Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. She turned to the dog, which seemed to perfectly understand what was happening. "Okay, friend, show us the way." The animal wasted no time. With a determined bark, it began to run back down the road, occasionally looking back to make sure it was being followed. The ambulance, with Sarah in the passenger seat and the dog running ahead, made its way back to the waterfall road. Sarah's heart was pounding in her chest, a mixture of adrenaline and fear of the unknown. As they approached the curve where they had found the first injured man, the dog began to bark more intensely. It left the main road, entering an almost invisible trail that snaked between the trees. "There!" shouted Sarah, pointing to a spot among the dense vegetation. The paramedics stopped the ambulance and everyone jumped out of the vehicle. The dog was already a few meters ahead, barking insistently near a clump of bushes. As they approached, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Partially hidden by the vegetation lay an unconscious man, his firefighter uniform torn and stained with blood. "My God!" muttered one of the paramedics, immediately kneeling beside the injured man. "How did we not see this before?" Sarah looked at the dog, which was now sitting calmly beside the firefighter, its eyes fixed on the man's face. There was a connection there, a loyalty that went beyond human understanding. As the paramedics worked to stabilize the firefighter and prepare him for transport, Sarah crouched down beside the dog, gently stroking its head. "You saved his life," she whispered, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. "You're a true hero." The dog looked at her, its intelligent eyes seeming to understand every word. It gave a soft bark, as if thanking her for the recognition. As the firefighter was carefully placed in the ambulance, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't simply leave this extraordinary dog behind. "You're coming with me, friend," she said, gesturing for the animal to follow her. "I think we have a lot to figure out about you." The dog hesitated for a moment, looking one last time at the firefighter being taken away on a stretcher. Then, with a decisive movement, it stood up and followed Sarah back to the ambulance. As the vehicle sped back to town, sirens blaring and lights flashing, Sarah couldn't help but think that this seemingly ordinary morning had turned into the beginning of something much bigger. A story of courage, loyalty, and mystery was just beginning to unfold in Flower Valley. With the dog lying at her feet in the ambulance, Sarah looked out the window, watching the trees pass by in a green blur. She knew in her heart that her life and that of the entire town were about to change forever. And it all started with a simple act of bravery from a nameless dog. The hospital in Flower Valley was a modest 2-story building, painted in a soft shade of blue that contrasted with the lush green of the surrounding hills. That morning, the usual silence of the place was broken by the frantic arrival of the ambulance. Sarah watched, her heart tight, as the paramedics rushed into the hospital with the injured firefighter. The dog at her side let out a low whimper, its eyes fixed on the entrance of the building. "Easy, friend," Sarah whispered, gently stroking the animal's head. "They'll take good care of him." As they waited in the parking lot, Sarah couldn't help but notice the dog's unusual behavior. It alternated between moments of restlessness, pacing back and forth, and periods of intense concentration, as if listening to something only it could hear. "You're not an ordinary dog, are you?" Sarah murmured, more to herself than to the animal. As if answering her question, the dog turned to her, its intelligent eyes seeming to convey a silent message. There was something in that look that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. After what seemed like an eternity, one of the paramedics came out of the hospital and approached Sarah. "The firefighter is stable," he informed her, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of relief and fatigue. "But we still don't know exactly what happened to him. He's unconscious and—" The paramedic was interrupted by a sudden bark from the dog. The animal had stood up and was now staring fixedly at a point beyond the parking lot. Sarah followed the dog's gaze and saw a man hurriedly walking away. He was wearing a dark coat despite the warmth of the morning and seemed to be making a conscious effort not to be noticed. "Who's that?" Sarah asked, intrigued by the man's suspicious behavior. The paramedic shrugged. "No idea. Probably just another curious onlooker, attracted by the commotion." But Sarah wasn't convinced. The dog continued to stare fixedly in the direction of the man, a low growl growing in its throat. "I think I'm going to take a look," Sarah said, already moving in the direction the man had taken. "Hey, wait!" the paramedic called. But Sarah was already far away, the dog trotting faithfully by her side. They followed the mysterious man for a few blocks, maintaining a safe distance. The dog seemed to know exactly what to do, guiding Sarah through shortcuts and alleys she didn't even know existed in Flower Valley. Finally, they arrived at an old house on the outskirts of town. The building, with its dusty windows and unkempt garden, looked like it had been abandoned for years. The man quickly looked around before sneaking in through the back door. Sarah hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she was getting into something potentially dangerous, but her curiosity and the dog's determination urged her to continue. Carefully, she approached one of the side windows, crouching down to peek inside the house. The dog stayed by her side, alert and silent. Inside the house, Sarah could see the man in the dark coat, animatedly talking to another person. The room was dimly lit, but she could make out maps and documents scattered on a makeshift table. "We can't let them find out," Sarah heard the man say, his voice muffled through the glass. "If that nosy firefighter wakes up and starts talking—" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This was no coincidence. The man was talking about the firefighter they had rescued earlier. Suddenly, the dog at her side tensed up. Before Sarah could react, it let out a loud bark, alerting the men inside the house. "Damn!" Sarah muttered, quickly ducking down. She heard hurried footsteps inside the house and, without thinking twice, grabbed the makeshift leash she had made for the dog and ran as fast as she could. They ran through the streets of Flower Valley, Sarah feeling the blood pulsing in her ears. Only when they got back to the center of town, breathless and with racing hearts, did she dare to look back. There was no sign of pursuit, but Sarah knew she had witnessed something she shouldn't have, and somehow it was connected to the mysterious firefighter and the brave dog at her side. "What have we gotten ourselves into, huh, friend?" she said, patting the animal's head. The dog looked at her, its eyes full of an understanding that went beyond what Sarah could explain. At that moment, she knew she couldn't simply ignore what she had seen and heard. Determined to find out more, Sarah headed to the local police station. Sergeant Miller, a middle-aged man with an impressive mustache, greeted her with a friendly smile. "Dr. Sarah, what a surprise to see you here. Any problem with a runaway animal?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to begin. "Actually, Sergeant, it's something a bit more complicated." In the following minutes, Sarah reported the events of the morning, the rescue of the firefighter, the strange behavior of the dog, and finally what she had witnessed at the abandoned house. Sergeant Miller listened attentively, his face becoming more serious with each word. When Sarah finished, he leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "This is concerning, to say the least," he finally said. "But, Dr. Sarah, you understand that we can't just raid a property based on a partially overheard conversation, right?" Sarah nodded, frustrated, but understanding the sergeant's position. "I know, but I'm sure there's something wrong going on, and somehow it's connected to this dog and the injured firefighter." Sergeant Miller scratched his chin, pensive. "Well, maybe we can start by investigating the firefighter. You said he's still unconscious at the hospital?" "Yes, at least that was the case when I left there." "All right. I'll send someone to ask some questions, see if we can identify him and understand what might have happened to him." Sarah felt a slight relief. It was a start, at least. And what about the dog? He seems to be the key to all of this. The sergeant looked at the animal, which was sitting patiently beside Sarah. Well, he certainly seems special. Why don't you take him to the veterinary clinic? Do a checkup. See if he has a microchip or any identification. It might give us some clues. Sarah agreed, grateful to have something concrete to do. As she stood up to leave, Sergeant Miller called her again. "Dr. Sarah, please be careful. If what you heard is true, there might be dangerous people involved. Don't do anything reckless." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. "I promise to be careful, Sergeant." Leaving the police station with the dog by her side, Sarah found herself immersed in thoughts. The day that had started so ordinarily was now filled with mystery and potential danger. At the veterinary clinic, Sarah performed a complete examination on the dog. To her surprise, the animal had no microchip or any other form of identification. Physically, it was in excellent shape despite some recent scratches. "Who are you, after all?" Sarah murmured, looking into the animal's expressive eyes. In response, the dog tilted its head and let out a soft bark, as if to say, "I wish I knew too." As Sarah pondered the next steps, the clinic's phone rang. It was Sergeant Miller. "Dr. Sarah, we have news," he said, his voice tense. The firefighter woke up. Sarah's heart raced. "That's great. Did he say anything? Is he okay?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, it's complicated. He's conscious, but he doesn't remember anything. Not the accident. Not who he is." Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. Amnesia. It looks like it. The doctors say it might be temporary, a result of the trauma. But for now, we're in the dark. Sarah looked at the dog, which seemed to be listening to the conversation attentively. "And now? What do we do?" The sergeant sighed. "For now, we keep investigating. We're checking records of missing or on-leave firefighters. As for you, Dr. Sarah, please keep your eyes open. If you see anything suspicious, let me know immediately." After hanging up, Sarah sat down, feeling the weight of the situation. The mystery seemed to only deepen, and she had the feeling they were just scratching the surface of something much bigger. The dog approached, putting its head in her lap in a gesture of comfort. Sarah smiled, stroking its ears. "Looks like we're partners in this investigation, huh, buddy?" she said softly. "I don't know where this will lead us, but I promise we'll get to the bottom of it. Together." The animal looked at her with those wise eyes, and Sarah felt a wave of determination grow within her. Whatever mystery surrounded Flower Valley, the amnesiac firefighter, and this extraordinary dog, she was determined to unravel it. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the streets of the small town, Sarah knew her life had irrevocably changed. An unexpected journey had begun, and she could hardly imagine where it would lead them. With one last look at the dog, she stood up. "Let's go home, partner. Tomorrow will be a long day." And so veterinarian and dog left the clinic, walking side by side down the quiet streets of Flower Valley, ready to face the challenges that awaited them. The mystery was just beginning to unfold, and Sarah had the feeling that the answers they sought could change not only their lives, but the fate of the entire town. The next morning dawned cloudy in Flower Valley, as if the sky reflected the mystery hanging over the town. Sarah woke up early, her thoughts still agitated by the events of the previous day. The dog, which she had provisionally decided to call Hero, slept peacefully at the foot of her bed. "Good morning, partner," Sarah murmured, stroking the animal's head. Hero slowly opened his eyes, his tail thumping softly against the mattress in acknowledgement. As she prepared breakfast, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the amnesiac firefighter and the suspicious conversation she had witnessed. There were missing pieces in this puzzle, and she was determined to find them. With a cup of coffee in hand, Sarah sat down at the kitchen table, spreading out some local newspapers she had saved over the past few months. If there was something connecting all these events, perhaps she could find clues in the old news. Hero watched attentively as she flipped through the pages, occasionally letting out a low bark when she paused on a specific article. "You're trying to tell me something, aren't you?" Sarah asked, intrigued by the dog's behavior. After almost an hour of research, a pattern began to emerge. In the last 6 months, there had been a significant increase in the number of small incidents in the region. Fires in forested areas, strange accidents on rural properties, and even some temporary disappearances of local residents. "How did we not notice this before?" Sarah murmured to herself, feeling a shiver run down her spine. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Sergeant Miller. "Dr. Sarah, good morning. We have news about the firefighter," he said, his voice tense. He started to recover some fragments of memory, but he's still quite confused. "He mentioned something about controlled fire and hidden project. I thought you'd like to know." Sarah felt her heart race. "Thank you, Sergeant. This could be important. I've also made some interesting discoveries in the old newspapers. I think we need to talk in person." They arranged to meet at the police station in an hour. Sarah quickly got ready, determined to bring Hero with her. The dog seemed to have a sixth sense for these things, and she didn't want to leave him behind. On the way to the police station, Sarah noticed something strange. A black car, which she didn't recognize as belonging to any local resident, seemed to be following them at a distance. Hero noticed it too, becoming alert and letting out a low growl. "Stay calm, friend," Sarah whispered, quickening her pace. "Let's get to the police station soon." When they finally entered the police building, Sarah let out a sigh of relief. Sergeant Miller greeted them in his office, his serious expression indicating that the situation was grave. "Before we start," said the sergeant, closing the door, "I should inform you that we received an unexpected visit this morning. 2 men claiming to be from the Environmental Protection Agency were here, asking questions about recent incidents in the region." Sarah frowned. "And that's unusual. What's unusual is that when I checked their credentials after they left, I found no record of them at the EPA. Something's not right, Dr. Sarah." Hero, sitting at Sarah's feet, let out a low bark, as if confirming the sergeant's suspicion. Sarah then shared her discoveries from the newspapers, detailing the pattern of strange incidents that had occurred in recent months. The sergeant listened attentively, his expression becoming increasingly concerned. "This is disturbing," he finally said, "but we still don't have concrete evidence of any wrongdoing. We need to be cautious in how we proceed." At that moment, Hero abruptly stood up, his ears perked and body tense. Before Sarah or the sergeant could react, the dog ran to the window, barking insistently. Sarah approached, carefully peeking outside. The same black car she had noticed before was parked across the street. "Sergeant," she called, her voice low and urgent, "I think we're being watched." Sergeant Miller joined her at the window, his face hardening when he saw the suspicious vehicle. "This is no coincidence," he muttered. "Something big is happening in Flower Valley, and I fear we're just scratching the surface." Sarah felt a mixture of fear and determination grow inside her. "What do we do now?" The sergeant thought for a moment before responding. "We need to be smart. If there's something illegal going on, we can't alert them that we're investigating. I'll assign some officers for discreet surveillance, but we need more information." Sarah nodded, an idea forming in her mind. What if I pretended to be just curious about the firefighter's story? I could ask some questions around town, see if anyone knows anything. It would be less suspicious than a police officer asking the same questions. The sergeant hesitated, clearly concerned about Sarah's safety. "It's risky, but it might work. Just promise you'll be careful and not put yourself in unnecessary danger." "I promise," Sarah assured, feeling Hero lean against her leg in a gesture of support. Leaving the police station, Sarah decided her first step would be to visit the hospital. Maybe she could get more information about the firefighter's condition and hopefully speak to him personally. At the hospital, Sarah was greeted by Dr. Emily, a young doctor she knew in passing. "The patient is more lucid today," Dr. Emily informed, guiding Sarah down the hallway. "But there are still many gaps in his memory. He mentioned something about an investigation he was conducting, but he can't remember the details." When they reached the room, Sarah was surprised to see the firefighter's reaction upon spotting Hero. His eyes widened, a mixture of recognition and confusion on his face. "That dog," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "I know him. He saved me?" Sarah felt her heart race. "Yes, he guided us to you. Do you remember anything else?" The firefighter closed his eyes, concentrating. "Fragments. I was investigating something dangerous. Fire, but not natural. And a symbol, a circle with a flame inside." Sarah exchanged a significant look with Dr. Emily. That information could be crucial. As they left the room, Sarah noticed Hero acting strangely again. The dog seemed restless, sniffing the air and staring fixedly in a specific direction. Following Hero's gaze, Sarah saw a man in a lab coat quickly turning the corner. as if he was fleeing from something or someone. "Dr. Emily," Sarah called, keeping her voice low. "That man, does he work here?" The doctor frowned, looking in the indicated direction. "I've never seen him before. Why?" A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Something wasn't right. Hero remained alert, a low growl growing in his throat. "I think we need to increase security around the firefighters' room," Sarah suggested, trying to stay calm. "And maybe it would be better to inform Sergeant Miller about this stranger." Dr. Emily nodded, taking out her phone. "I'll take care of that right away." As the doctor walked away to make the call, Sarah crouched down beside Hero, stroking his ears in a comforting gesture. "Good job, partner," she whispered. "It looks like we're on the right track, but also in the path of someone who doesn't want us to discover the truth." Hero looked at her, his intelligent eyes seeming to understand every word. Sarah felt a wave of determination grow within her. Whatever mystery surrounded Flower Valley, the amnesiac firefighter, and the strange incidents, she was more determined than ever to unravel it. Leaving the hospital, Sarah decided her next step would be to investigate the symbol mentioned by the firefighter, a circle with a flame inside. Could it be the logo of some company or organization? As she walked back to the center of town, with Hero trotting faithfully by her side, Sarah couldn't help but feel that they were getting closer to something big, something that could change Flower Valley forever. The sky was still cloudy, but a ray of sunlight managed to penetrate the clouds, illuminating the path ahead. Sarah took this as a sign of hope. No matter how obscure the secrets they were about to discover, the truth would always find a way to come to light. With this renewed determination, Sarah and Hero continued their journey, ready to face any challenge that came their way. The mystery of Flower Valley was just beginning to reveal itself, and they were at the center of it all. The afternoon sun was beginning to set when Sarah arrived at the Flower Valley Municipal Library. The old building, with its imposing columns and stained glass windows, seemed to hold secrets as old as the town itself. Hero, always alert, followed closely. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Anderson," Sarah greeted the elderly librarian, who smiled as she entered. "Sarah, dear, what a pleasant surprise. And who is this furry friend?" Mrs. Anderson asked, leaning over to take a look at Hero. "This is Hero," Sarah replied, patting the dog's head. "I hope there's no problem bringing him in. He's very well behaved." Mrs. Anderson made a dismissive gesture. "Oh, don't worry. As long as he doesn't start barking at the books, it's all fine. What brings you here today?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, considering how much she should reveal. "I'm doing some research on the recent history of Flower Valley. Specifically, I'm looking for information about a symbol. A circle with a flame inside. Have you seen anything like that?" Mrs. Anderson's expression subtly changed, a shadow passing over her eyes. "Interesting. Why don't you take a look in the local history section? You might find something useful there." As Sarah headed to the indicated section, she couldn't help but notice that Mrs. Anderson was watching her attentively. There was something in the librarian's reaction that intrigued her. Hours passed as Sarah rummaged through books, old newspapers, and town records. Hero remained patiently by her side, occasionally raising his head when he heard a noise. It was when Sarah was about to give up that she found something. In a dusty book about the founding of Flower Valley, there was a small mention of a secret society called Guardians of the Flame. The symbol described was exactly what the firefighter had mentioned. "Look at this, Hero," Sarah whispered, showing the page to the dog. "It looks like we're on the right track." At that moment, Hero tensed up, his ears perking in alert. Sarah heard footsteps approaching and quickly closed the book. "Found what you were looking for?" Mrs. Anderson's voice surprised her. Sarah turned, trying to appear casual. "Oh yes, more or less. Thanks for the suggestion." Mrs. Anderson observed her for a long moment before speaking again. "Sarah, dear, be careful with what you're looking for. Sometimes the past is better left where it is." Before Sarah could respond, the library phone rang and Mrs. Anderson walked away to answer it. Sarah took the opportunity to discreetly photograph the book page with her cell phone. Leaving the library with Hero, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They had found a clue, but Mrs. Anderson's veiled warning left her uneasy. Determined to share her discovery, Sarah headed to the police station. On the way, she couldn't help but notice that the streets seemed emptier than usual for that time of day. At the police station, Sergeant Miller greeted her with a worried expression. "Sarah, I'm glad you came. We have news about the firefighter." "What happened?" Sarah asked, feeling her heart race. He's recovered more of his memory, the sergeant explained. He remembers discovering something about an illegal operation in the forests around town, something related to controlled fires and resource extraction. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Sergeant, I think I've discovered something that might be related." She showed the photo she had taken of the book, explaining about the Guardians of the Flame. Sergeant Miller studied the image, his forehead furrowed in concentration. "This is disturbing. A secret society operating in our small Flower Valley. It sounds like something out of a mystery novel. But it makes sense, doesn't it?" Sarah insisted. "The strange incidents, the fires, the attacked firefighter, it all seems to be connected." At that moment, Hero, who had been lying calmly at Sarah's feet, abruptly stood up, barking at the window. The sergeant moved quickly, peeking through the blinds. "Damn," he muttered. "That black car is back." Sarah joined him, recognizing the vehicle that had followed them earlier. "Are they watching us?" "It looks like it," the sergeant replied, his voice tense. "Sarah, I think you might be in danger. Maybe it's better if you stay here at the station for now." Sarah shook her head, determined. "I can't hide, Sergeant. We need to find out what's going on. And I have a feeling time is running out." The sergeant looked at her for a long moment before reluctantly nodding. "All right, but I'm going to assign an officer to keep an eye on you. And please, promise you'll be careful." Sarah agreed, grateful for the sergeant's concern. As she prepared to leave, an idea came to her mind. "Sergeant, what if we investigated the forest areas mentioned by the firefighter? Maybe we'll find physical evidence of what's happening." The sergeant considered the suggestion. "It's risky, but it might be worth it. I'll organize a small team for a discreet expedition tomorrow at dawn. Are you in?" "Absolutely," Sarah replied without hesitation. Leaving the police station with Hero, Sarah felt a mixture of adrenaline and apprehension. They were getting closer to something big, she could feel it. But the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. On the way back home, Sarah noticed something strange. The lights in the central square, usually lit at this hour, were all off. The darkness seemed denser, more threatening. Hero suddenly stopped, growling softly at the shadows. Sarah felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. There was someone there, watching them. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling slightly. For a moment there was only silence. Then a deep, low voice answered from the shadows. "Be careful with the fire you're stoking, Dr. Sarah. Some secrets are better left in the ashes." Before Sarah could react, Hero barked furiously, running towards the voice. But when they reached the spot, there was no one there. Only a small, shiny object on the ground, a pin with the symbol of the circle and flame. With trembling hands, Sarah picked up the pin, feeling its weight in her palm. It was a message, a warning. But it was also confirmation that they were on the right track. Looking at Hero, who remained alert by her side, Sarah felt a renewed determination. "We're going to get to the bottom of this, partner," she murmured, "no matter what happens." As they walked hurriedly home, Sarah couldn't help but feel that Flower Valley had changed. The shadows seemed deeper, the whispers of the wind more threatening. But amidst all this darkness, there was a glimmer of hope. The truth was out there, waiting to be discovered. And tomorrow, with the expedition to the forest, they would take another step towards that truth. Sarah just hoped they were prepared for what they would find. Arriving home, Sarah locked all the doors and windows, double-checking each lock. Hero made a round of the house, sniffing every corner as if looking for intruders. Sitting at the kitchen table with the mysterious pin in front of her, Sarah began to make notes, connecting the dots of what they had discovered so far. The Guardians of the Flame, the controlled fires, the resource extraction. A pattern was emerging, a conspiracy that went beyond what she could have imagined. As the night wore on, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. Tomorrow, in the forest, they might finally find the answers they were looking for, or they could face even greater dangers. With Hero lying faithfully at her feet, Sarah finally allowed herself to rest, knowing that the next day would bring challenges that would test her courage and determination like never before. The sky was still dark when Sarah woke up, her heart beating fast with anticipation of what the day might bring. Hero was already up, alert and ready for the mission that awaited them. As she prepared, Sarah couldn't help but notice the unusual silence that hung over Flower Valley. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. At 5:30 a.m., Sarah and Hero met Sergeant Miller and a small team of police officers at the edge of the forest. The air was cold and damp, and a dense fog hung between the trees, giving the place an almost supernatural atmosphere. "Good morning, Sarah," the sergeant greeted in a low voice. "Are you ready?" Sarah nodded, adjusting the backpack on her shoulders. "More than ever, Sergeant." The group began to enter the forest, guided by maps and the fragmented information provided by the firefighter. Hero led the way, his keen nose picking up scents that humans couldn't perceive. After almost 2 hours of walking, Hero stopped abruptly, his ears perking up in alert. Sarah crouched beside him, carefully observing the area ahead. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. In response, Hero began to sniff the ground more intensely, following an invisible trail. The group cautiously followed him, their senses on high alert. Suddenly, the forest opened into a clearing. What they saw made everyone stop, dumbfounded. In the center of the clearing was a metal structure, camouflaged among the trees. It looked like some kind of improvised laboratory or research station. "My God," muttered Sergeant Miller. "What is this?" Sarah approached carefully with Hero by her side. The windows of the structure were covered, but through a small gap she could glimpse the interior. Sophisticated equipment, maps, and charts covered the walls. "Sergeant," Sarah called in a low voice, "I think we've found the Guardians of the Flame's center of operations." As the group approached to investigate, Hero suddenly tensed up, growling softly at a point in the forest. Before anyone could react, a voice cut through the silence. "I wouldn't take another step if I were you." From behind the trees emerged several figures dressed in black, all wearing masks with the symbol of the circle and flame. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she ran. Sergeant Miller instinctively placed himself in front of the group, his hand on his holstered weapon. "Who are you? What's going on here?" One of the masked men, apparently the leader, stepped forward. "We are the Guardians of the Flame, the true protectors of Flower Valley. And you're meddling in matters you don't understand." Sarah, gathering all her courage, spoke. "We understand enough. The fires, the accidents, the attack on the firefighter, it was all your doing, wasn't it?" The leader let out a bitter laugh. "You're smart, Dr. Sarah, but you still don't see the big picture. What we do here is for the greater good of Flower Valley." "What greater good can justify putting lives at risk?" Sergeant Miller questioned, his voice filled with indignation. The masked man made a broad gesture, encompassing the surrounding forest. "This land holds secrets, Sergeant, resources that could transform Flower Valley into the most prosperous town in the country. But to access them, some sacrifices are necessary." Sarah felt her mind spin with the implications. "The controlled fires. You're trying to clear specific areas of the forest?" "Precisely," the leader confirmed. "But it's more than that. The fires are just the beginning. The real treasure is below the surface." At that moment, Hero began to bark furiously, drawing everyone's attention. The dog was frantically digging at a spot near the metal structure. Sarah cautiously approached, observing what Hero had discovered. Her heart almost stopped when she saw what was buried, a sample of a shiny mineral with properties she had never seen before. "That's why," she murmured, understanding finally dawning. "You've discovered a new mineral." The leader of the Guardians nodded slowly. "A mineral with unique properties, capable of revolutionizing the energy industry. Imagine, Doctor. Sarah, a clean and almost infinite source of energy. Flower Valley could become the center of a new technological era." Sergeant Miller, still in a defensive position, argued, "But at what cost? You're willing to destroy our forest, put lives at risk, all for greed?" "It's not greed, Sergeant," the leader retorted. "It's progress. Sometimes to build a better future, some sacrifices are necessary." Sarah, still holding the mineral sample, felt the weight of the situation. It was an incredible discovery, with the potential to change the world. But the Guardians' methods were questionable, to say the least. "There must be a better way," she said, looking directly at the masked leader. "A way to extract this mineral without destroying the forest or endangering people." For a moment, silence reigned in the clearing. The tension was palpable, with both sides ready to act at the slightest sign of aggression. Finally, the leader of the Guardians spoke again. Perhaps you're right, Dr. Sarah, but understand, we kept this secret because we knew there would be resistance. People fear change even when it's for the better." Sergeant Miller, still distrustful, asked, And the firefighter, why attack him? He discovered our operation by chance, explained the leader. We tried to convince him to join us, but he refused. We had no choice but to neutralize him temporarily. Sarah felt a wave of indignation. You almost killed him. And for what? To keep a secret that in the end could benefit everyone if it were conducted the right way? Her words seemed to have an impact on the masked group. Some exchanged glances, as if questioning their own actions for the first time. The leader of the Guardians slowly removed his mask, revealing the face of a middle-aged man with tired but determined eyes. My name is Robert Anderson. I'm a geologist and I was born in this town. All I ever wanted was to see Flower Valley prosper. Sarah stepped forward, still holding the mineral sample. Mr. Anderson, I understand your vision, but the path you've chosen, it's not the right one. We can do this transparently, involving the community, respecting nature. Robert looked at the sample in Sarah's hands, then at his companions, and finally at Sergeant Miller. Perhaps we're willing to consider a different approach. Sergeant Miller, sensing the change in atmosphere, slightly relaxed his posture. We're willing to listen, Mr. Anderson. But first we need to clarify everything that happened, and the firefighter deserves an apology and explanations. As the group began to discuss the next steps, Sarah crouched down beside Hero, stroking his head. Good job, partner, she whispered. You helped us unravel a mystery much bigger than we imagined. The dog looked at her with his intelligent eyes, as if he perfectly understood the magnitude of what they had discovered. As the sun began to rise above the trees, illuminating the clearing, Sarah felt a mixture of emotions. Relief that they had finally discovered the truth, concern about the implications of this discovery, and hope that maybe they could find a path that would benefit everyone. The mystery of Flower Valley had been unraveled, but the journey was far from over. Now they faced the challenge of reconciling progress and preservation, greed and the common good. And Sarah knew that, with Hero by her side and the community united, they would find a solution. As the group began to make their way back to town, Sarah couldn't help but think that this was just the first page of a new chapter in Flower Valley's history, a chapter that, she hoped, would be written with wisdom, compassion, and respect for everything that nature had entrusted to them. The return to Flower Valley was marked by a tense silence. Sarah, Sergeant Miller, and the members of the Guardians of the Flame walked side by side, each immersed in their own thoughts. Hero, always alert, kept close to Sarah, as if sensing the importance of the moment. As they reached the central square, they were greeted by an anxious crowd. It seemed that news of something important happening in the forest had spread quickly through the small town. Sergeant Miller took the lead, his firm voice echoing across the square. Citizens of Flower Valley, we have important news to share with all of you. In the following minutes, he briefly explained about the discovery of the mineral in the forest and the actions of the Guardians of the Flame. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of shock, indignation, and curiosity. How could you hide this from us? Someone in the crowd shouted. What does this mean for our town? Asked another. Robert Anderson, the leader of the Guardians, stepped forward. His face showed a mixture of remorse and determination. We made mistakes. We believed we were acting for the greater good of Flower Valley, but we realize now that our approach was misguided. Sarah, feeling the need to intervene, spoke. What we discovered today is something extraordinary. A mineral with the potential to revolutionize how we generate energy. But how we handle this discovery will define the future of our town and possibly the world. Doctor. Emily, who was among the crowd, asked, And what about the firefighter? Will he be okay? Sergeant Miller nodded. He's recovering and out of danger. Those responsible for his injury will be duly investigated and held accountable for their actions. As the discussion unfolded, it became clear that the town was divided. Some saw the discovery as a golden opportunity for progress, while others feared the destruction of the forest and Flower Valley's traditional way of life. It was then that Mrs. Anderson, the librarian, stepped forward. Her voice, usually soft, sounded clear and strong. My dears, our town has always been a place of balance between the old and the new. Perhaps this is our chance to show the world that progress and preservation can go hand in hand. Her words seemed to calm the mood a bit. Sarah saw an opportunity to propose a way forward. What if we formed a committee, she suggested, a diverse group of citizens, scientists, and authorities to study the best way to proceed. We could explore sustainable ways to extract the mineral, ensuring the preservation of most of the forest and the well-being of our community. The idea was received with murmurs of approval. Sergeant Miller agreed. It seems like a good start. Transparency and collaboration will be essential from here on out. Robert Anderson, seeming relieved that there was a constructive path forward, added, "We're willing to share all our knowledge and research with this committee. It's time we do things the right way." In the days that followed, Flower Valley entered a whirlwind of activity. The committee was formed, including Sarah, Sergeant Miller, Robert Anderson, Mrs. Anderson, and other community representatives. Experts from nearby universities were invited to assist with the studies. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, dividing her time between the veterinary clinic, committee meetings, and visits to the firefighter who was recovering in the hospital. Hero, faithful as ever, accompanied her every step of the way, becoming a sort of unofficial mascot for the committee. A week after the discovery in the forest, Sarah was in her clinic, tending to an elderly cat, when Hero began to bark excitedly. Looking out the window, she saw a familiar figure walking with difficulty down the street. "I don't believe it," she murmured, running outside. It was the firefighter, leaning on a cane but standing and smiling. "Hello, Dr. Sarah," he greeted. "I thought it was time to thank you and this four-legged hero personally." Sarah hugged him carefully, tears of relief in her eyes. "I'm so happy to see you up and about. How do you feel?" "Like I've been run over by a truck," he laughed, then turned serious. "But mostly, I feel grateful. If it weren't for you two, I might not be here." Hero approached, wagging his tail and receiving a pat from the firefighter. It was a heartwarming scene, a reminder of what really mattered amidst all the chaos of the past few weeks. "I heard about the discovery and all the commotion in town," the firefighter commented. "Looks like we have interesting times ahead." Sarah nodded, a tired smile on her face. "You have no idea, but we're trying to do the right thing. It's a delicate balance between progress and preservation." The firefighter looked thoughtfully at the busy street. "You know, when I became a firefighter, I swore to protect this town and its people. Now more than ever, I feel we all have that responsibility. To protect, not just against fires, but against greed, haste, lack of long-term vision." His words touched Sarah deeply. It was exactly what the committee was striving to do, find a path that would protect Flower Valley in every sense. That night, during another long committee meeting, Sarah shared the firefighters' words. They seemed to resonate with everyone present, reminding them of the true purpose of their work. Robert Anderson, who in recent weeks had shown genuine commitment to correcting his mistakes, proposed an idea. What if we used part of the future profits from the mineral extraction to create a protected nature reserve? We could preserve a large area of the forest and still invest in research on forest regeneration. The proposal was received with enthusiasm. It was a concrete step in the right direction. As the meeting was coming to an end, Sarah looked out the window, seeing the lights of Flower Valley shining in the night. The town was changing, yes, but perhaps for the better. With the right people working together, there was hope for a bright future. Hero, lying at her feet, let out a sleepy yawn. Sarah smiled, stroking his ears. "You're right, friend. It's time we headed home." Walking through the quiet streets of Flower Valley, with Hero by her side, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey they had taken. From a frightening mystery to an opportunity for positive transformation, the town had faced its demons and was emerging stronger and more united. The future was still uncertain, with many challenges ahead. But Sarah knew that as long as they held onto their values and worked together, Flower Valley would find its way. And she, along with Hero, would be there every step of the way, ready to face any new mystery or challenge that arose. Arriving home, Sarah looked once more at the starry sky. A shooting star crossed the firmament, and she made a silent wish that Flower Valley would become an example to the world of how progress and preservation can go hand in hand. With that hopeful thought, she entered her house ready to rest and prepare for another day of hard work towards a better future for all.